Not too long ago, I conducted a poll on Instagram, asking people about their main focus for 2025. To my surprise, one response stood out the most: the desire to understand who they truly are. It seems like a lot of us are grappling with the same deep question: who am I really? Why is it so difficult to connect with our authentic selves? It's common to feel a sense of loss when we don't know what drives us, what fuels our passions, or what truly excites us. This sense of disconnect can leave us feeling empty or unsure of our place in the world. And when people tell you to just follow your passion, it can feel like an unattainable, unrealistic idea, especially when you haven't been able to find your true self in the first place. So why is it so hard for so many of us to know who we really are? In this episode, I want to explore 4 key factors that contribute to this struggle, particularly when complex trauma has been a part of our lives. Together, we'll look at the ways early experiences shape us and the psychological barriers we need to overcome in order to reconnect with our authentic selves. Let's begin with the first key factor: complex trauma and childhood suppression of authenticity. At the core of human nature, one of our deepest and most profound needs is to feel loved and accepted for who we are, not for who we think others want us to be. In a healthy, emotionally stable environment, this need is often nurtured from the very beginning. Our parents or caregivers support us as we explore the world and express ourselves. We're encouraged to share our thoughts, explore our feelings, and find out who we are without the constant fear of judgment. This supportive foundation gives us the space to grow into our authentic selves, to know our likes, dislikes, interests, and ultimately, our passions. However, the experience of complex trauma can dramatically hinder this process. If a child grows up in an environment where emotional safety is absent, they may find themselves disconnected from their true self. It could be a case where a caregiver is emotionally unavailable, or perhaps the child's feelings are dismissed, invalidated, or punished. Over time, this experience teaches the child that being their authentic self isn't safe, and they begin to adapt by suppressing their true nature. For instance, imagine growing up in a household with a father who is frequently angry and strict. As a child, you're always on edge, afraid to make any mistakes that might provoke his anger. Instead of expressing your true emotions or thoughts, you become hyper-aware of his mood, and you adjust your behavior accordingly. You suppress your own needs and desires, trying to fit into a mold that is more acceptable to others, especially to someone whose approval feels so important. Over time, this pattern becomes ingrained, and you may lose touch with your authentic self in the process. Your identity becomes entwined with trying to avoid conflict, rather than embracing who you truly are. The second factor that can prevent us from knowing our true selves is a lack of space to explore our natural curiosity. As children, one of the most crucial elements in developing self-awareness is the freedom to explore and be curious. In a healthy environment, we are encouraged to discover the world around us, to ask questions, try new things, and make mistakes. Through this process of trial and error, we come to understand our interests and build a sense of who we are and what we care about. It's in these moments of curiosity that we discover our true passions, which may lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves as we grow older. But when complex trauma is involved, this natural exploration is often restricted. Instead of feeling free to be curious, we might be coerced into fulfilling someone else's expectations. For instance, a parent may project their own unfulfilled dreams onto us, pushing us toward a particular career or path they believe is right for us, even though it might not align with our authentic interests. In other situations, our hobbies or activities may become sources of pressure, competition, or even punishment, stifling our natural inclination to explore. Imagine a child who has a deep love for art, who finds solace and joy in painting and drawing. However, instead of supporting this passion, their parents constantly tell them that art is not a practical career. They insist that the child needs to focus on becoming a doctor or an engineer, pushing them away from their artistic endeavors. Over time, the child begins to internalize the belief that their love for art is unimportant or even worthless. They may stop drawing altogether and suppress their creative side to meet the expectations of others. This is just one example of how external pressures can prevent us from connecting with our true selves and passions. Another significant barrier to self-awareness comes from disconnecting from our inner world, our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. In a healthy emotional environment, we are taught to process our emotions, to understand what they mean, and how they influence our decisions and behavior. But when complex trauma is involved, the situation is very different. In emotionally unsafe environments, we learn to disconnect from our inner world as a way to cope with the pain, confusion, and instability we face. This disconnection becomes a survival mechanism, an attempt to block out the overwhelming emotions that might otherwise be too difficult to manage. For example, let's say you grow up in a home where your parents are constantly fighting and your father is verbally abusive. As a child, you're torn between the love you feel for your father and the pain caused by his harsh words. These conflicting emotions create inner turmoil, but there is no one to help you navigate them. You might retreat into your mind, fantasizing about a different family, a different life, anything to escape the constant emotional turmoil. But instead of confronting and understanding your feelings, you learn to shut them down. You create a survival persona, a mask that protects you from the emotional chaos. However, this persona doesn't reflect your true self. It's simply a coping mechanism designed to help you survive in an unsafe environment. The final factor that I want to discuss is the development of a survival persona in response to inconsistent and unsafe environments. In emotionally stable households, we are able to develop a sense of security and safety that allows us to feel grounded and emotionally regulated. This sense of stability helps us cultivate a solid sense of self, who we are, what we stand for, and what we want from life. However, in environments marked by complex trauma, the unpredictability and chaos can keep our nervous system in a constant state of stress. When you never know what to expect, it becomes difficult to feel safe or secure. In these situations, we often develop survival personas, ways of being that help us cope with the uncertainty around us. These survival personas are not our true selves. They are the ways we protect ourselves from harm. We might become people pleasers, constantly trying to keep others happy and avoid conflict. We might adopt controlling behaviors as a way to regain some semblance of power over our lives. Or we might develop anxiety and compulsive behaviors as a way to manage the stress of living in an unpredictable environment. The problem arises when we start to believe that our survival persona is our true identity. This mask becomes so deeply ingrained that we forget it was never meant to be our authentic self. It was simply a shield, a defense mechanism against the unpredictable and unsafe world we grew up in.